depression runs in my family pretty strong. 3 members died from suicide.
Welcome to another episode of Chewing the Fat. I am your host, Big Rob. Thank you so much for following, downloading, listening to the podcast. I really appreciate that. Thanks for the folks that have written reviews on Apple Podcasts. I love getting the email alerts when folks have written a review on there. If you haven't done that, I encourage you to do that. If you like the podcast, give me a 5-star review. That always helps out. I'm very excited about my guest today. He is going into broadcasting 30 years tomorrow. Please welcome the one and only Austin Rhodes.
Hello, Big Rob.
Hello, sir. Thank you for coming over.
Thank you for inviting me. And by the way, it's 30 years of the Austin Rhodes Show. I'm actually like 39 in the business.
Wow.
At this point, yeah.
So what was, so before we dive into that, cause I got all kind of questions.
Sure.
You born and raised here in Augusta?
I was born on Warner Robins Air Force Base because my dad was in the service at the time, but Augusta's always been my home. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was there, I think the first 3 months of my life. And then we moved into an apartment on Montesana Avenue. Okay. Where we were until we moved into our first house in 1968 in National Hills neighborhood. Yeah.
Nice. In all that time. So were you one of these kids that loved playing radio when you're growing up?
I used to have a walkie-talkie that I would tape the transceiver button down on and set it next to my record player. And we had, I think, 3 or 4 albums that I had access to. And I became very, very well acquainted with Dionne Warwick, James Brown, and the Mamas and the Papas. Those are the 3 albums that I knew I could play. Now I had favorites myself, but I was aiming at an adult audience, so I didn't play my Monkees albums because my parents didn't like those. My mother and father ate up Mamas and Papas and Dionne Warwick and James Brown.
So who had the other walkie-talkie?
I don't know. I was broadcasting to whoever got it.
Whoever might have that same brand walkie-talkie.
And I think my mother would listen on occasion, or at least she would pretend to.
Were they always encouraging? Obviously, it sounds like they were very encouraging of that type of. At that time, it was play. I'm sure. How old were you?
4, 5 years old, something like that.
Well, that's. I mean, creative play is important. I think for development.
Absolutely.
That's one of those things, especially, if you don't have arts in school in some form or fashion, it's a disservice to kids.
Well, you're a little bit younger than me. I'm 57. So I grew up in a very unique situation in that because I was very, very close to both sets of my grandparents. I spent an inordinate amount of time, in a good way, over at their houses, and they were of the radio generation. We're the TV generation, they were the radio generation. Okay. And they had a radio on all the time. And ironically, that radio station was WGAC.
Wow.
And I used to listen to Braves games. Yeah. GAC was the home of the Braves from 66 up until fairly recently, and they're still in the company, just on another station now. But I would listen to the Braves games, I would listen to the talk shows, I would listen to the morning, and listen to George Fisher in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where my love for radio started, and that's who actually I was trying to be like, probably more like George Fisher than Buddy Carr or any of those crazy guys and actually Buddy didn't come along until I was in junior high school. So,
Right. Yeah. So in all of that time, and you're coming along in school and stuff like that, did you ever have any type of what were you involved in school? Did you do like drama? Did you do band, chorus, that type of stuff?
Absolutely. I didn't do band or chorus. I did try band briefly, but I was not a band person. Got involved with theater. Yeah. When I was in grade school, actually first grade, they were putting on a play called Dudes and Daisies. I was at a school, National Hills Elementary School, that was grade 1 through 7 when I went there in first grade. And one day during lunch, I saw the 6th and 7th graders doing a play. They were practicing, and I was incensed that we weren't allowed to be in it.
Wow.
And I went up and basically pitched a little hissy fit. And Mrs. Rubenstein, God bless her, God rest her soul, stuck me in the play. And to this day, the 6th and 7th graders remember me and tease me about it. I'll see him out in oh, you're the kid that was in Dudes and Daisies. And it was a bunch of, gay 90s songs. Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer to. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. That type of thing. And they set me up in a little outfit, just like the other guys were all wearing the straw hats and the fake mustaches, the handlebar mustaches. And and every boy had a girl, every dude had a Daisy. And there was one tiny little short girl, Lauren Beatty was her name. She's now Lauren Banks. She's one of the bigwigs over at Augusta Christian. And she was my date in the play because she was the only one short enough to be with the first grader.
Wow.
I don't think she was very happy about that. She was very gracious though.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And that's where I got my start in theater.
That's great. That's great. And you still do theater. Was it right before COVID shut everything down? I saw you in Mamma Mia with the Augusta Players.
Yeah, it was the last show before COVID shut everything down. As a matter of fact, I started after my Dudes and Daisies experience. Started doing theater whenever I could. I had a music teacher at National Hills named Mrs. Clark, who would not just have the kids sing, here we go round the maypole and all that, but she would bring in records and she would have us sing with the records. And I took to that like a fish to water, and, was bringing in my Partridge Family albums and my Monkees albums and my Archie's records that we cut off from the back of Alphabet cereal, and just having a good old time with that stuff. That's awesome. That kind of got me hooked on public performance even more so. And then the first show that I did with the Augusta Players was a collection of one acts and what we called paper bag skits in between the one acts. And they would put the little kids in the paper bag skits. I mean, these were like little fairy tale things that just took 10 minutes to do while they changed sets behind the curtain.
Right.
But we were asked to play juvenile roles in the older kids shows. And I worked with a couple of people that to this day I'm very good friends with, people like Kent Holden and Betty Walpert.
Yeah.
And Karen Gillespie, and trying to think some of the other names that come to mind from that era. But that was a lot of fun, and the bug bit me at that point. The next year, I did Midsummer Night's Dream that Joanne Green directed, and Kent was in that too, as a matter of fact. Christina Rice, her, very talented artist. She was a librarian over in Columbia County for many years, beautiful red hair. Yeah. She's a very distinctive woman when you see her. She played Queen Titania, and I was one of her fairies.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that was my entree into the Augusta Players, and I loved it. Did a lot of it in school, theater work. Unfortunately, when I got into the workforce, my hours were too crazy, and the last show that I did was a show called Red, White, and Black in 1987, which was actually not a Players production. It was a special show that was being done in celebration of Georgia's 200th anniversary of the Constitution being ratified. Jim Garvey wrote it. And Matt Stovall was in it. He had the lead, and Jim Garvey was in it, and Steve Walpert directed it. Pam Stovall McCorkle played her husband's wife, ironically, Matt Stovall at the time. And I'm trying to remember who else was in that show. Chris Lowe, who's very active in some of Tim Johnson's local films that he's done. Matter of fact, I suggested Chris to Tim Johnson. I still have finder's fee for that one.
There you go.
Trying to think who else was in that show that was fun to think about. But that was my last experience. I just got too busy with work at that point. And I was invited back in 2003. I had 2 invitations within the same week. One came from Barbara Feldman, who wanted me to assist Storyland in kind of getting over the hump when Matt Stovall passed away. Yeah. He was very, very active in that group. And I don't want to say take over his roles, but I pretty much did. Right. I became the guy that or the characters that Matt had played for years. And we did Sleeping Beauty. And while we were doing Sleeping Beauty, I got a phone call from, it was Richard Justice or Debbie Ballas, both of them, wanting to know if I would play the pervert DJ in Grease. And I was made for that, man. Are you kidding me? So that got me back started with the Augusta Players. And I've been very active with Storyland, and I've done some things with the Players. And then Mamma Mia hit a couple of years ago, and that was a dream come true for me. I was a huge ABBA fan when I was a kid, and I saw that show on Broadway back in '99. And it's funny, I don't know about you, because I know that you're very active in theater. When I see a show, I always watch the show that's new. I always watch the show with an eye as, okay, what could I play in this? And I was watching Mamma Mia, and I was watching the three dads very carefully, and there was one that never sang lead. And I said, "Wow, I can do that."
That's the one. That's the one.
That's the one. And he's got they let that character. In case you're not familiar with the show, is three men. One of whom is the dad to a young bride that's having her wedding that weekend, and she's invited the three dads, the three prospective dads.
Right.
And one of them, Bill Austin, believe it or not, is his name in the play. Is generally speaking one of several different nationalities, depending on who's doing the show. In the movie, they turned him into a Swede, simply as a nod back to the original material that the
from the music,
the ABBA music,
yeah.
And what was that guy's name? He's Thor's assistant in all the Marvel movies. What is that guy's name? It's going to drive me crazy. Oh, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly.
And he's got Skarsgård.
Skarsgård, yeah.
He's got sons that are in the business. So when I was trying out for the role, I said, if it's okay with you, I want to try this guy out as an Australian. They said, oh, yeah, we've seen that. Give it a shot. Next thing you know, I was cast. And it's amazing because two of the three strongest male musical performers in Augusta, the one that got left out of this because he was not in the show was Russell Joel Brown. The other two are Saul Baird and Casey Johnson. This was Saul's first show back since coming back from New York.
Right.
And so he kind of blew everybody away. He played Headbanger Harry in the show. And of course, Casey was Sam. So the three of us were the dads, and it was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
The lady, love her to death, Joy Ledford, who played my love interest, Rosie, in the show, stole the show.
Yeah.
And I think I've been told the funniest scene in the show is she and I doing Take a Chance on Me and Joy chasing me all around the stage. She won an Augie for it. I was very proud of her. She's a fantastic lady.
Yeah. Yeah. And what a great show. And it's so great that you've still got that heart for performing, and that you seem to take to it as a fan of the medium, as well as somebody who wants to be able to give back to the community as well.
Well, a lot of it. I mean, I love the giving back to the community in the sense that I think you get a lot of people involved doing a good thing, and you entertain people, which I think is a very underrated public service.
Absolutely.
Having said that, I'm not a huge vocal person. I don't sing very well. I sing okay, but I don't sing very well. I can sing when I'm playing a wolf. The French wolf in one of the Storyland shows, I can sing like a French wolf. But boy, singing as a regular human being is kind of difficult for me.
Yeah.
But the great thing about Mamma Mia, much like Grease, is that those songs are beaten into our consciousness. Yeah. And it's one of the few shows, those two shows actually, two of the few, that virtually anyone can see and they'll know most of the music. So many other shows, with the exception of something like Beautiful, the Carole King story, or Jersey Boys.
Right.
Same situation with those songs. And I just think that you have a very interesting and limited window of opportunity to be in a show like that. And I don't know that I've ever had more fun on stage than the closing number of Mamma Mia, where the six of us are singing lead vocal together on Waterloo.
Yeah.
And because I've been singing that song since 1974.
Right.
And loving every minute of it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And the costuming wasn't bad. I mean, you know.
I laugh because getting into that thing, for me especially, was a huge pain in the tuchus. And I actually had to have an assistant who just so happened to be Joy Ledford's husband. And a great guy. And I would literally go from making out with his wife on stage to running backstage to get naked to jump into my 1970s Lycra suit. And if it hadn't been for Adam, I would have never gotten into it. So he would, the instant I would run back there and start stripping my clothes off, how was Joy tonight? How was Joy? Breath good? Breath good? Oh, absolutely. Beautiful.
That's awesome.
You got a little lipstick on you. That's all right. That's all right.
Very minty. It was very minty. That's
very minty.
Awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome. Hey, I mean, you've done. You did something with Lachat as well, right?
I've done several things with Lachat.
Yeah,
Lachat Noir.
So,
I was part, and I loved your interview with Chris Bailey.
Yeah.
I was sitting at the table all those years ago after a rehearsal, a Storyland rehearsal one night, and it was Chris Bailey, Doug Joyner, who else was at the table? I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, several of us sitting at the table, and Chris and Doug were talking about their dream, what they wanted to do in life. And Doug wanted to open a black box theater, and Chris kind of did too. And the next thing you know, they're drawing it out on a napkin. The guy who's a real estate guy says, absolutely, I got a place downtown that's for sale right now. And they started planning it out, all three of them, and asked me, hey, you want to get in on this? And I had to make a decision. If I had gone in financially, and I would have loved to have done it, and I was at a point in my life when I kind of could have, I would never be able to mention them on the air.
Oh, yeah.
You cannot push something that you've got a financial interest in on the air. And I said, I would rather I can help you a lot over here telling everybody go to do this new cool thing. Or I can, Carrie Anderson and her wonderful husband, Scott's their son. I'm going through the whole list of all the Andersons now. But anyway, and I didn't look that up, by the way. It came to me. Shame on me for not remembering Carrie. I've got all these beautiful young actresses that have come in my mind, and they're starting to push out the older ones. But anyway, I love Carrie. Carrie's great. Carrie and her husband were the lead. Well, two of the leads in the first Storyland show that I did, and absolutely love them to death. But anyway, so Mr. Anderson was the real estate guy, and they were planning it all out. And I just had to kind of sit back at that point and watch them do their thing. What's really interesting about that is, if you know the story very well, the Andersons got out of it pretty quick, and Doug and Chris continued, and now Doug's kind of out of it. I mean, I think he still owns the building, but it's Chris's baby. Yeah. And wow, what fun and amazing job he has done with that theater. It is such a joy, such a wonderful gift. Yes, that Chris and in the background, Doug and the Andersons have brought to the community, and so many others have been involved. Whether it's Roy Lewis and Richard Justice back in the day, helping them all out. It's just been a great community effort. Absolutely, kind of feel like that's Augusta's version of the barn raising. Yeah, because everybody's had a hand in it. Absolutely, absolutely. And like you said, the fact that it's there and it's a place that it filled a need that wasn't being filled by anything else in the area. So I can't believe I blanked on Justin Anderson's name. That's all right. That's all right. Best looking guy. It's amazing. All these good looking people that allow me to hang out with them every now and then, and it's very humbling. But Justin looks like he just stepped off the cover of GQ magazine, and Carrie looks like she's 20. Yeah. And me, in the meantime, I look like the guy that dropped him off in the cab. But anyway, they're great people and love them to death. And I just really am very, very proud that I got to kind of watch that. And I encouraged them. I mean, I didn't do any of the grunt work that they did. God knows. I remember visiting them down there when they were, 95 degrees on a Saturday morning, pulling old plywood and rotten flooring up. Yeah. I remember that building when it was the Capri Cinema. Yeah. I mean, it'd gone through several iterations. I think I'm talking about when it was the Capri Cinema, not the place. Let's go to the Capri. Yeah, no. Place. No, it was the dirty movie place. You had to go in the back door to get into the movie theater. Do you know that was the theater and that was the case that settled Georgia's obscenity law? Really? Yeah. Did not know that. The name of the film that was actually cited when they shut it down and they took it to the Supreme Court of Georgia and opened it back up was called Her Family's Jewels. And I don't know if it's where she kept her jewels. I don't know if that was a reference to something that she had or something. Yeah. But I remember that case playing out when I was a kid. Wow. That's crazy. But now an amazing theatrical venue. Oh yeah. I mean, and they're doing so much more stuff with it now too. I've done, I want to say 3 or 4 shows down there. And I've also with Meredith Anderson, a few years ago, did several productions of Love Letters down there, which we had a ball with. And I am so proud we were able to raise over $3,000 each show that we did down there. Wow. So that's, it's funny when I first asked Chris, he and I were having a conversation about something. He was talking about how tight money was. And this is 8 years ago, something like that. And I said, I've been reading about Love Letters and different people doing it in different places, and they do it for charity. Media folks or television stars that are used to working together. Larry Hagman and Barbara Eden did it. Oh, wow. Larry Hagman then did it with the woman that played Sue Ellen, whatever her name is, on Dallas. And I said, I would really like to try this, and I think we could do something. And he was a little bit skeptical, not that we could do it. He just said, a lot of people try and do fundraisers for us, but it just doesn't make financial sense. And I said, well, what do you mean? If you sell out the theater? He said, well, yeah, but it's the cost of this and the cost of that, and la, la, la. And I said, no. If I do a fundraiser for you, you get every dime for every seat sold in this theater. And if somebody's sitting in the seat, somebody's paid for it. I said, the theater does nothing except open the doors. I said, now you can work tech for me if you want to, but you're not paying anything. You're not paying the royalties. You're not paying for the makeup that Meredith wears. You're not paying for the props that we use. All of that's going to be covered. And he couldn't believe it. He had done several very high profile fundraisers there where he had worked his tail off and filled the place up to the rafters and barely made $1,000. Meredith and I did that over $3,000 twice.
That's awesome.
So we were very proud of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you have a connection as we start to get back to your careers. I mean, I love you being part of the theater community, but you have a background in television. Was that your first media gig? Did you start radio first, then go to TV, or?
It all goes back to theater. Yeah. Matt Stovall, who I knew through the Augusta Players. He needed help doing high school football, and we were working on a show. And he said, what are you doing Friday night? And I said, nothing much. He said, why don't you come by and help out, and you can, see how it all works. And for 2 years, I did that. And I initially started doing just statistics, and I would only be on the air during halftime saying, tonight Evans had 400 yards passing and whatever. And then the next year, I became a little bit more of an active part, or had a more active part in the broadcast. And then shortly thereafter, I think he and I did that 3 or 4 years together. I was his color commentator and enjoyed the heck out of it. It was a lot of fun, traveled all over the state doing it. And back in those days, high school football, we started off with Evans, and it was the year that Evans had their state championship quest end on a very, very controversial and sour note. The quarterback got caught with a radio in his helmet, and they yanked him out of the rule at the time was if you get caught with improper equipment, it's a 15-yard penalty and loss of down, and that's it. Well, when they caught Evans doing it in a playoff game, they gave him the penalty, 15 yards, and then they had a meeting of the Georgia High School Association and kicked him out of the playoffs.
Wow.
And they were the number one ranked team in the state by far. No one would have touched them, and it would have been a huge state championship. So it was a big story at the time, huge scandal. And we were right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But so I started doing radio there when Bob Beckham took over, and I was also playing records, DJing part-time on the weekends. I was at WMTZ in Martinez, Evans, and doing that on the weekends and fill-in work. And right about 87, WGAC went on the market, and George Beasley owned it, and he sold it to Bob Beckham. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was a kind of an owner financing deal with Bob making the payments to George. And when I went to work in their news department there in 87, early 88, I was just getting married for the first time. And I was 23.
Wow.
And full-time news. And it was mainly based on my ability to communicate, which Matt knew about. Matt was the program director.
Okay.
But it was also my just from birth obsession and love of politics and current events. And I was born to it. My son's kind of like that with basketball. If at some point somebody gives him an opportunity to make money talking about basketball, he could probably do just what I did. It's not work when you grew up knowing about it and learning about it from your parents, and every conversation at the dinner table when I was a kid had to do with politics. And back in those days, we would have these huge family dinners, and everyone was encouraged to give their opinion, but you better know what you're talking about, or you'd have your head served back to you on a platter.
Oh, wow.
And you would, walk off in shame. And I learned very early on to keep my mouth shut and to listen as much as I possibly could. But when I did have an opinion, I would speak up.
Yeah.
And it was like second nature to me almost, getting into it like that. And then got to bring up your father-in-law. Yeah. The radio program that my grandfather would always listen to on my dad's side, Daddy Zeb, was Voice of the People. It was hosted by a guy named Bob Young, who is in no way, shape, or form related to the Bob Young that was mayor of Augusta and who worked ironically in radio and television. But it was Barry Young, who is your father-in-law.
Yep.
And he hosted that show very successfully for a number of years. And I would listen to it every afternoon with my grandfather when I was over at his house. And then it got to the point where my mother and father were getting a little concerned about me because I would turn the radio off of WBBQ when they were listening to music so I could turn over and listen to Bob do Voice of the People.
Yeah.
And I started calling into the show on occasion. And I would give opinions on things like the 1976 presidential election between Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford. And he nicknamed me the WGAC Whiz Kid and appreciated hearing from me, I think, once or twice a week. I could tell he'd get a little tired of it. As most radio talk show hosts would. But I was a novelty to him, and he was nothing but gracious to me every time we talked. It's funny, I never got to meet him until much, much later when I was working at GAC in news, and he came to visit Matt one time. He and Matt Stovall were best friends.
Yeah. I remember Val talking about just Matt being over at the house and visiting and things like that, and their friendship and all like that.
Now, your wife's mother was
Barry's first wife.
Right. And I'm trying to remember her name.
Oh, Bonnie.
Bonnie, that's right.
Yeah.
So I think I remember hearing Bob talk about Bonnie on the air. And I remember distinctly, much later in life, hearing about how he left GAC. He was headhunted out of the area because of Ed Dunbar over at BBQ. He recognized Bob was one of the few people that had ever competed with them for an audience that he wanted. He didn't mind George Fisher competing because George Fisher was getting the geriatric crowd. It bothered him that young people were listening to Bob, do Voice of the People, and he helped get him hired out of the market, and he never looked back. No one was ever impressed with me that much. There's a funny story I can tell you about that in a minute, but it was Augusta's loss because literally until I went on the air in 1992, no one ever did aggressive talk radio with both knowledge and enthusiasm. You had some with enthusiasm and no knowledge. You had some with knowledge and no enthusiasm.
Yeah.
I was the first one since Bob to kind of bring it back to where it needed to be.
Yeah. And you're now 30 years on.
Holy cow! Yeah.
Having done that.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I tell you the story real quick?
Go ahead.
So a couple of times in my career, for one reason or another, I've considered leaving and going somewhere else and doing something else.
Which is often the case with radio. As I've said with other people, it's often the case with radio.
What was really interesting is when I started at GAC, I had left Channel 12 where I'd been a reporter, assignment editor, producer, weekend anchor. And I was the fill-in anchor for everybody. If Rick Sykes went on vacation, if Bob Smith went on vacation, if Sam Crenshaw, I was the fill-in guy. So I was making $22,000 a year. Yeah.
Big money.
In 1992.
Yeah.
And when I left Channel 12, I walked into GAC making 27.
Wow.
And that was that. I made 27 for about 2 weeks. And then one of the big wigs from Beasley heard me and decided to lock me up in a better contract, give me like a $2,000, $3,000 raise. So I was at $30,000. Boom. So I crept along making getting incremental raises along the way, but I was still very much middle class. I was still kind of on the lower end of the totem pole until one day I got a phone call from an attorney who knew Beasley Broadcasting's contract form. And he said, I'm so-and-so. I wish I could remember his name. I'd call it. I'm so-and-so. I have an office in Roswell, Georgia, which is exactly 158 miles from where you're sitting. That means I am outside the 150-mile radius of you having to notify your employer that I've called you. And he knew Beasley contracts. Yeah. And I said, okay, what's up? And he said, we own the Rush Limbaugh Show. It was Premier. I say Premier. Well, yeah, Premier iHeart, which at that point owned Limbaugh and distributed it in whatever iHeart was back in those days. What was it?
Probably he was either.
It wasn't iHeart. It was
Clear Channel or
Clear Channel. Yeah. It was Clear Channel.
Okay.
So he said our policy is we leave Limbaugh where he is if he's doing well and making us money in a market, and he's doing very well for you over at WGAC, unless, and by the way, Clear Channel owned WBBQ at the time, unless we can take Limbaugh and put him with something local that's also successful, and guess what? You're it. So would you consider sitting down and talking to us? And I was very impressed. And by the way, I heard later on John Patrick had something to do with this. But I am also loyal. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't going to sneak around on my boss. I felt like I was cheating on him. And so I went to him the very next day and I said, here's a gentleman that called me and he wants to talk to me about coming to work for him somewhere. And he indicated they'd be willing to work with me on sitting out a non-compete and all kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I said, but their plan is to take Limbaugh from this radio station, but only if I'll go with them. And his eyes got real big and he was writing things down, my boss, Kent Dunn. And the next day I walked in and the vice president of Beasley Broadcasting was sitting in his office wanting to talk to me. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, here's the deal. And they turned ghost white because you have to understand something. That represented noon until 6 on WGAC and about 80%, if not 85% of their income, those two shows. Yep. And, you know, Limbaugh is a great draw, especially back in those days, but it had very limited inventory. So what you were supposed to do with Limbaugh, attract your audience to the station and then kill on the local programming on both sides of it. Right. And man, have they killed off my show. Whoa, have they killed. And they didn't want to see that go away. So they finally swallowed gulp and made it worth my while to never really ever want to do anything but what I'm doing. Oh, wow. And that was 2002. Yeah. Something like that. And here we are 20 years later. Wow. Because I very easily could have left back then and you know, go and sold cars and, you know, made what I was making. Yeah. But they made it worth my while to want to be a radio talk show host for the rest of my life.
That's great.
Knock on wood. But I really, and John later coughed up or admitted that he may have slipped my personal contact information into the right hands up there. Huh. But the plan would have been to stick me not on BBQ probably, but either on another one of their FM stations and go talk radio with it, or stick me on 1340 AM, which, you know, was being done in markets all over the country. Lower power AMs back in those days were still very lucrative. What's really crazy about that entire conversation though, and I really have to speak up whenever anyone talks about the genius of WBBQ, because 104.3 genius until they started monkeying around with it in the mid 90s. Yeah. But the genius behind that station is evident in the success, the money that they made, but that someone over there wasn't bright enough to see when Rush Limbaugh hit, we got to do something with this massive news department that we've got, which was one of the best in the southeastern United States. Oh, yeah. Second, probably only to WSB, really, and maybe WBT in Charlotte, but way better than anything in Columbia, way better than anything in Birmingham, way better than anything in Jacksonville, Florida. So BBQ had this incredible news presence, and they should have scooped somebody up and gone talk radio with one of their stations. Had they done that, they'd have made even more money and would still be making money off of it. But that somebody over there wasn't bright enough to see that troubles me greatly. and it was insulting back in the day. Now I just laugh at it. But that they would think that was not a format that was worth their while. Well, guess again. I mean, and it really, like I said, you have to understand back in those days, WBBQ had a news department that had, I think, 7 full-time people in it. And at our height, at our largest, GAC had 3 news people. Yeah. And now we've only got really 2 dedicated. And one of them came from BBQ, Gail Mino. Yeah. And the fact that it was mobile news. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, they were in cars. There was a fleet of cars all across wherever news was happening, reporting live. And it would drive Bruce Stevens, the incredibly talented music director over there, and Harley Drew and all those guys crazy that George Weiss would do a 2.5-minute report on a deer being hit on Washington Road. And it's clear the deer flew 45 feet in the air and lots of antler bits here and there. Well, I mean, and they would, because they were fast moving rock and roll station.
Right.
And you could have done that all day long on News Talk, had a ball with it.
Yeah.
Just like they do at WSB in Atlanta right now.
Yeah. That's crazy. That's crazy. So at 30 years, you looking for 30 more? What's next? What's not? And when I say what's next, I mean, I don't mean like, are you changing or anything?
Well,
I mean, like,
it's not me. What's
the plan?
Yeah. It's not me so much. We're about to start a real, sincere digital push at Beasley. Mm-hmm. It's nationwide. It's not just us and Augusta. Mm-hmm. Because that's really the way that the entire industry is going, doing much like what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
And I get that. I had always predicted, I thought, because the bandwidth really is there, that in a fairly short period of time, once satellite radio technology became ubiquitous in almost every household in some way, shape, or form, that we would use that technology to send all of our signals up to the bird. So that way you didn't have any signal problems ever. Mm-hmm. And that has not materialized quite like I thought that it would. But what took its place is digital download and streaming.
Yeah.
And, you know, the problem is that you still have issues where you've got to be able to get the stream. Right. But people listen to me in Turkey and Jamaica. And I get phone calls and notes from California, New York, Pittsburgh all the time. Yeah. I have relatives that live far away that get to hear and that type of thing. So that's the future, I think, of talk radio. And no matter what's going on nationally, and there's always something fun to talk about in these days of Trump and Biden and Roe versus Wade and all this, that, and the other. But you let a little old lady get beat up at Augusta Mall, people want to hear about it. Yeah. You let one of our politicians do something stupid, people want to hear about it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's... And you can never go wrong talking about that stuff. And thank God, knock on wood, praise the Lord. I've been doing what I do long enough to where I can sit back and talk about the day that Augusta Mall opened and the day that Regency Mall closed and what was responsible for that. I remember the names of several of the young people that were murdered in the wake of Regency Mall going south. Yeah. I remember... who the mayor was 3 mayors ago. Yeah. I've got most of those guys on speed dial too. So if I need to call them, I can. Yeah. And that, knock on wood, that's something that makes me a little bit hard to replace. If I got hit by a truck tomorrow, they better hope my phone went in my pocket. Wow. Because they could use those numbers. Right. At the same time though, 30 years. Wow. Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice to do what my wife is going to do when she hits her 30 years? She's a school teacher, and say, "Good night, everybody," and start getting that mailbox money. Yeah, yeah. Which you and I both know in the broadcast business, ain't no such thing as mailbox money. Your pension is generally the last check you got from your active shift. Yep, absolutely. And it's, as far as like, you still seem to love it. You still seem to love what you're doing too. And as far as like I said, communicate with people, getting the stories out there, getting the point of view out there, getting people talking, getting the conversation started. And I think that's really important to have somebody that is not just doing it for a job, is doing it because they're passionate about it. Well, again, thank goodness I grew up in a family that taught me. Yeah. And as they taught me, I just watched them. Yeah. And I wanted to be like them. And I had a very, very close aunt Jewel, Jewel Childress, who passed away a few years ago, who was one of the founders of the Somerville Neighborhood Association. She ran for office years ago. She was one of the founders of the Richmond County, or CSRA, Republican Women's Group, and was very, very active up until right at the end of her life. My mother was a member of the executive board of the Republican Party in Richmond County and on the Board of Elections. And I've got other family members that have had political involvement as well. And again, it was just a situation where if you were going to be in that household, you better be up on your current events. And if not, there was going to be trouble. Yeah. or at the very least, just keep your mouth shut and keep your head down. Yeah. My brother, who is an incredible musician, learned very early on not to open his mouth about politics because that wasn't his thing. And to this day, he can sing like a bird and play every instrument you put in front of him. But trust me, you don't want to hear him talk about politics because he's incredibly left wing and he's a little crazy.
I love Bentley, though.
Oh, I love him too. I love your little dog that your wife was holding a minute ago. But I'm not going to invite him to sit down and have a political chat. And that's, I've told Bentley 1,000 times, buddy, I don't invite you over to the house to discuss politics. Don't even. And people will tell me, well, you just don't like somebody because you don't agree with him. I said, I love my brother. Wouldn't vote for him for dog catcher.
Right.
But I love him.
Right.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Aside from theater, what's bringing you joy right now, man?
Oh, my kids.
Yeah.
My 31-year-old daughter, who is a staffer for Congressman Rick Allen, she, back years ago when he was running for his first successful term, he had run one time before and come up short. She came to me and said, Dad, I think I'm going to go to work for Rick Allen's campaign. What do you think about that? And I said, I don't like it. And she said, I thought you liked Rick. And I said, no, I like Rick fine. Rick's a great candidate and I will vote for him. But two things, I don't think he's going to win. He was running against an incumbent congressman. And also, you can work your tail off as a campaign staffer and do the very best possible job you can ever do, and still lose, and it's not your fault, and you're out of a job. I said, so I don't want you to put yourself through that. And she said, okay, all right, well, thank you very much. I'm going to do it anyway. I said, okay. The night that he won, hard to believe, the night that he won, he beat an incumbent congressman. And he walked over to Christine, and there was one other young lady standing there with him. And I think those were the only two, and I wish I could remember her name. Those are the only two workers that had been with him from the very beginning. There were, during a political campaign, particularly one across a big congressional district like the 12th, you got 20 people that come and go.
Yeah.
But Christine and this other young lady were the only two that stayed with him from the very beginning to the very end. And we were there, celebrating. And he said, ladies, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And my daughter had stars in her eyes about going to DC. And then she Googled apartment rent in DC, and it broke her heart. And I remember her being in tears. Dad, how do people do it? And at that point, God knows, she was 23 at the time. And I said, sweetheart, you either have to have 80 roommates or live 85 miles away. And I said, neither one of them is good.
Yeah. And
so she decided to stay in Augusta and work at the office here, and she's been there ever since, and she loves what she does.
Yeah.
She helps people with problems with the VA and Social Security. And recently, this is kind of dramatic, when a bunch of Americans were stuck in Afghanistan, she helped get them home.
Wow.
And helped get other people back over here who needed to be, like, say an Afghani citizen had a mother over there. Yeah. They were busting tail trying to get a lot of those folks out of there. And Christine played a role in that. I'm very proud of her. Yeah. And I have a 13-year-old son, and you say the joy of my life. Tomorrow, right at this time, I will be screaming at his basketball game. And I'm having a ball doing all that. I was never a basketball fan ever, really, in my life. And he got an interest in it when he was pretty young. And he was much better at it than he was baseball. He did fine in the field, never could figure out how to hit a ball. And God bless him. And when you're a young man and you're not doing everything that you can at the plate to help your team, you get down on yourself pretty quick. And he was so good at basketball, left baseball in the dust. No pun intended. Loves football too. Really good at that. And his coach last night was asking me, he said, you must really get into basketball with Bo because he understands things and he's got a great understanding of the game and he's got great strategy and you must be a really good mentor. And I said, no, sir, it's NBA 2K. It's video games. And I laugh about some of that, but you got to learn strategy in those games, and he studies it. Yeah. And he soaks it all in and sucks it all up. And God bless him, he's doing pretty good. 6 feet tall too, 13 years old. Wow. Unbelievable. He's awesome. As tall as I am.
That's awesome.
And I'm 57.
You're going the other direction.
Yeah, boy, I'm shrinking.
Starting to shrink. Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. And you a big Pittsburgh fan too, of course, right?
Steelers. Yeah. Since I was a little bitty boy, started following the Steelers when I was 7 years old. I can remember the exact moment because it was a momentous occasion for everyone. I was playing football. My buddy Kerry Foss over at my grandfather's house. Kerry and his family lived across the street. And this was December 1972. We heard uproarious yelling and screaming across the street. And I looked up, and I can remember to this day, my grandmother had a light fixture on her porch that was attached by a chain, and I could see it swinging like an earthquake. And I'm like, well, what in the world's going on? You could, again, hear just noise. And Carrie and I ran over there and opened the door, and my father was sitting on the floor covered in beer. My grandfather was also sitting on the side of where his chair usually is, also with a mess. I think he had peanuts or something that turned over. And my grandmother just rolling on the floor laughing. And there was a broken lamp. There was a mess. And Dad was laughing. Daddy Zeb was laughing. And they just were pointing at the TV. They had seen the Immaculate Reception happen in real life. And they were pulling for the Steelers. And I didn't understand anything except that they had just destroyed the living room and they were drenched in beer. And my grandmother, who is the straightest arrow in the world, was dying laughing. So I decided at that point, I got to get in on this. I got to figure out how to have this much fun. And sadly, they lost the next week, but I couldn't wait until the next year, and I've been following them ever since. And I've been very fortunate, very blessed. I've gotten to know several key members of the organization through the years, and I've had some wonderful experiences. It's my mission in life to see them play in every stadium in the country. And I've made it to all of them but 4. Still got 4 on the list. And I've also seen them play in strange places like London and Toronto and Memphis, Tennessee, and took my son and my wife to the Pro Bowl a few years ago. So we got to see Steelers play in Orlando. So that's kind of our, everybody's got a bucket list. Mine is seeing the Steelers play in every NFL city. And I'm really said we're pretty close to it. My son, I didn't see my first Steeler game until I was 18. My son has, I think, been to 12 stadiums, and he's just turned 13.
Wow. My
daughter's been to more than that. And of course she's 31, but, so it's kind of a family deal now.
All right, Austin, this is the second segment of the show. We talk a little bit more about mental health, dive a little bit deeper into that. I'm a firm believer that there's no one that escapes a down day, a blue day, a day you just don't feel like getting out of bed, whether you call it depression, anxiety, or whatever. And I think being able to address that, it allows folks to understand that they are not alone in that. And especially working in an industry like radio where there's so much turmoil and stuff like that, it can get overwhelming. But for you, how do you keep the darkness at bay?
I don't know that you do. I think you channel it. If you're smart, you figure out a way to do that. When I was listening to your interview with John Patrick a few weeks back, one thing he didn't mention that I was thinking as I heard him is he and I, anyone in this business, are in a very unique position of having to perform 5 days a week, no matter what mood you're in. And nobody wants to hear you open a mic and say, oh, 48 degrees today, and I don't know what's going on. What do you think? I mean, you can do that when you're a librarian. Yeah. You can do that when you're working on widgets on an assembly line, but you can't do that when you're on radio. Yeah. And John's always done a really good job of keeping whatever's going on in his life out of his presentation. And I try it too, a little bit different with me in that I've got a heck of a lot more stream of consciousness going on than John does. John's a very structured broadcaster for the most part. He's got, 5 minutes to do news here, and we get the weather report there and sports and me. I open up the mic at 3, and it's me from 3 until 6, callers included. But I just decided a long time ago that you got a job to do, and if you can put whatever's bothering you in the background for a little bit, not only does it help you do a better job, it helps you understand that whatever you buried isn't going to kill you because it didn't kill you those 3 hours you were on the air. Yeah. Now I'm fixing to say something that hope some members of my family don't mind me admitting. Depression runs in my family pretty strong. I've lost 3 members of my family, and I'm talking about not distant aunts and uncles. I'm talking about people that I knew very well and that were major parts of my life, died from suicide. One just a couple of years ago. And I would have never in a million years thought my aunt, just lost recently, would have ever done that. It was something that was so completely and totally uncharacteristic of her in her usual persona. Her husband admitted that there had been times where she had really been troubled about certain things. And also she was dealing with some chronic pain issues that were just driving her nuts. But she was always positive, upbeat. I don't know that a single one of her coworkers ever knew anything about it. Her daughters knew that there was some issue there, but they didn't think it was a permanent disability. They just thought it was, hey, mom's got to deal with her stuff and see you tomorrow. And so I'm conscious of it in that I see what the loss of those individuals has done to their immediate family. And I tell you what, if you've ever had to talk to somebody whose mother, sibling, husband, daughter took their own life, as much as I love the three people in question, it's an incredibly selfish thing to do. And I don't blame them necessarily, because I think their pain blinded them so much to what they did. But I think if they had a clue in the world how much their absence hurt and affected the people that they loved the most, they would have never in a million years done what they did. As I've said, and John quoted me, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And I lost one cousin at 23 and another in her early 40s. And then my aunt was in her early 60s when she died. And it just really, it's a loss that you never get past. I deal with it from the perspective of, to some degree, mind over matter. But there's so many people out there that have real problems. A cancer diagnosis in a child is a real problem. Nuclear war is a real problem. Me not being able to shake the blues ain't on the list. And I always try and keep that in mind. At the same time, I also realize that the individuals that I lost were also very intelligent and warm people. And they were so overwhelmed by their darkness that they couldn't see the light. And so have to be mindful of that. And I'm very, very thankful, not that I lost those people in that way, but that their example has taught me how precious life is.
You're exactly right. Being in that close proximity to something like that happening to you, it changes your perspective on it. And it's a terrible way for that perspective to change in yourself, to have to go through that loss or see that loss and see that damage to families in a way like that. But to be able to take that and to realize, like you said, the stuff that you're going through, maybe not that bad, and to be able to process that, and to be able to, again, speak to that as you have, because I think even what you're saying now can bring light to others to know that they're not alone, that there are people that are going to care if they're not here anymore.
No, most definitely. Yeah.
That they will not just be missed, but there's damage that's done that they never would have intentionally done otherwise, and being able to let whoever know that if you're there, if they need to seek help, that there is somebody that they can talk to, that whether it be the 988 phone number, so instead of 911, there's 988, and it gets you connected to the suicide prevention line or mental health line. So if you need someone to talk to, all you have to do is dial 988. But that there is somebody there that does care and will listen, because I definitely think that those, for me personally, those overwhelming times of when I felt so alone and I just needed someone to talk to, but maybe there was no one to talk to. Sometimes as a man, you have a hard time, opening up to your spouse.
Well, yeah. And in the case of the two younger people that I lost, one had dealt with profound depression throughout most of his teen years, and he was 22 when he died. The other was a beautiful and talented, incredibly gifted teacher who lived a completely normal life as far as her own mental health went until she hit her late 30s and started developing a real issue with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia a little bit thrown in. and she self-medicated through alcohol, and she went to the best doctors. Her parents and her husband did everything in their power, and she didn't consciously kill herself, and that she reached a point where she said, okay, today's it, I'm going to write a note and go. She just engaged in very destructive personal behavior, attempting to self-medicate, and she poisoned herself, not realizing what she was doing. And she tried. It's absolutely heartbreaking to think about to this day, that beautiful, she was the light of everyone's life. I spoke at her funeral, and I made the comment that when her husband found her and married her, he caught lightning in a bottle. Nobody ever thought she'd get married. Nobody ever thought she would settle down. And he was sitting there in the pew nodding his head yes. And that she came to such a sad end broke all of our hearts. But again, wasn't her fault. She was sick, tough.
I'm a huge proponent of, like, if you cross my mind, I'm gonna send you a text, because I don't know why you crossed my mind. Be like, hey, how you doing? You crossed my mind. Hope things are cool. Just so you know, someone is out there thinking about you at random, whatever. Because I do think that helps some people, because you don't know where they're at, what moment they're at in their life. And again, you're saying it was accidental, and you don't know if that contact at some point would have paused somebody from reaching for another bottle or whatever. Yeah. You never
know. You never know what's going to set somebody off. And in the case of all three of these people, I never knew the last conversation I had with any of them was going to be the one. And I learned a very, very painful lesson with the first one. My cousin was 22 and I was 21 at the time, and he had an alcohol problem, and we knew that he was dealing with depression issues. But when I saw him out and about, I never wanted to be a downer. I never wanted to be the guy to tell him not to drink. And also, he was my older cousin, so he was kind of in charge of the relationship, so to speak. I was the follower, he was the leader, and I didn't challenge him because I didn't want him to feel bad. Well, I made the decision the day that I was his pallbearer that I would much rather have somebody that I love mad with me than put on a dark suit and walk them in the Westover. And I had another member of my family years later that dealt with alcohol abuse, and I was pretty rough on her. Just letting her know certain behavior isn't going to be tolerated, certain things can't be done. And if you want me in your life and you want my family in your life, you need to at least put the effort in. And I think that kept her around for a long time when she ordinarily probably would not have been. She struggled somewhat, not necessarily with depression, but with substance abuse. And finally, again, the tough love got to her. And I wasn't able to, and I wasn't mature enough, and it wasn't my position to be that way with my cousin, my male cousin. But if I had not been through that loss with him, I probably would have stepped back from my larger responsibility later in life. So it was a very painful lesson, but a very valuable one.
All right, Austin, this is the third segment of Showtime now for the Fast Five. It's Fast Five. Fast Five.
This is as close as I'm ever going to get to spinning the wheel on Price is Right.
Exactly. Fast Five is powered by Poddex. It's an app created by my friend Travis Brown. It's created for podcasters, but they're great conversation starters, interview questions. As a matter of fact, they've got the app on the Apple App Store as well as the Android App Store, but you can also get physical decks as well. As a matter of fact, if you go to chewinthefatbr.com/poddex and use the promo code CHEW, you can get 10% off your physical decks. But we're going to use the app today. No wrong answers. You ready?
I'm ready.
Question number one. In your travels, what's the most sentimental souvenir you've brought back with you?
Oh my goodness. Sentimental. I took home a jar of water collected at the confluence of the Allegheny and the Ohio River, the Allegheny and the Monongahela River, which form the Ohio, right where Three Rivers Stadium used to be. Actually, Heinz Field is there now. That was pretty cool. I'm a seashell guy.
Okay.
And when I'm in the Caribbean, I will swim out as far as I can go and find something cool at the bottom of the ocean and pull it out. And I've got my backyard looks like Jacques Cousteau exploded back there. I've got shells. And in the last trip that I made to Jamaica with my wife, they had a hurricane down there a couple of weeks before we were down there, and it had shifted some of the sandbars down there. And so the beach that I'd always gone to and found no shells all over the place, I brought home over 150 pounds of seashells in my suitcase.
Oh, wow.
And it's funny. They were making faces at the resort saying, I don't know, sometimes customs doesn't like to let all the sea life go and all that. And he said, but here's what you do. Put a little bunch of tags on them. So it looks like you bought them from somebody. Take all you want. Buy all you want. So we did that.
Wow.
Yeah. My backyard's pretty cool for sentimental souvenirs.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, question number 2. What was the first car you ever owned?
1971 Opel GT.
Wow.
Also known as a baby vet. And it was awesome. It was racing orange, not burnt orange.
Yeah.
Racing orange. And absolutely loved that car. Loved it. Smelled like gasoline. It had some improper ventilation going on in there. Nobody ever smoked in that car, that's for sure. But love that car. Good looking little thing.
Yeah. Are you a big car person?
No, not really.
Okay.
I didn't know I was going to get that car. My Uncle Freddie was a huge car person, and he was constantly on the look for something. And he saw that car at a very reasonable price and bought it, thinking, hey, if Austin wants it, fine. If not, I'll just keep it. And I made car payments to him for 11 months.
Oh, wow.
$100 a month for 11 months.
That's awesome.
So that was $1,100.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You ever thought of like trying to get another one, so to have your first car kind of thing?
They're very temperamental at this point, and they're very rare. I have a miniature Opel GT on my shelf at home, and our dear friend Tim Campbell from the Imperial Theater, Tim, if you're listening, I still know that you have my model Opel GT that I told you I would pay you to put together about 10 years ago, and he hasn't gotten to it yet. He's an expert model builder.
Oh, yeah.
And one of these days he'll finish it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's enjoying his honeymoon.
Oh,
right
yeah,
now,
big time,
I believe.
big time.
So awesome.
He went to Risa, I think.
Huh?
That's where he went.
Oh.
You have to look that up.
Okay.
RISA.
Okay. Because I thought
Trekopedia. Look it up.
Oh, okay. I was going to say I thought they went to Disney. So question number 3. Which actor made the best Batman?
Adam West.
There you go.
Adam West. And, but having said that, I really enjoyed Michael Keaton, and I didn't think that I would.
Yeah.
I cursed when I first heard he was cast, and I didn't get it. But when I saw the film, I really liked it. By the way, there's an incredible twist that unfortunately the Spider-Man movies have stolen, but apparently this was being done in the upcoming Flash movie. And I didn't know this. Do you know that Flash visits alternate universes, and Adam West is in one of them?
Oh, wow.
Can you believe that? They're actually going to admit that Batman and Robin, Burt Ward and Adam West, are out there somewhere. Wow. I love that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
That's awesome. Now, were you, obviously you were a fan of the TV show.
I have the series on Blu-ray, and I have a very expensive, large Batmobile in my media room.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
With your disdain for the announcement of Michael Keaton, were you from the Michael Keaton was a stand-up comic? Was that your first kind of introduction?
Yeah, I thought he would be silly, and he played the role perfectly.
Yeah.
I mean, he really impressed me, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I thought he did great. Yeah. All right, number 4. Speaking of movies, if someone made a movie about your life, who would play you?
Oh my Lord!
I always say this one can be in 2 parts. Who do you think would actually get the job, or who would you want to have the job?
Can I use old actors that can't do it now, but when he was young?
Sure.
James Caan.
Oh,
when he was younger.
Yeah.
Would have made a great Austin in the movie. Some people would say it's that idiot that runs his mouth all the time. He's in all the Leonardo DiCaprio movies. What's his name? Dadgummit. He's constantly losing weight and gaining weight. He was in super bad and
Jonah Hill.
Jonah Hill, thank you. Yes. Yeah, and I have been that fat, but then again, he's been skinny lately and back and forth, and I'm kind of that way too. So But he definitely has the hair down. what I used to have up there anyway.
That's awesome. And number 5. What was the last book you read?
The novelization of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is awesome. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Love that movie.
Yeah.
Love Tarantino. Last time I was in California, it was for the Chargers game a few years ago, and went to Musso and Frank, which is heavily featured in that movie.
Yeah.
And had the most expensive lunch I've ever had in my life. Love old Hollywood, and that, without a shadow of a doubt, would have been it.
Yeah, that's speaking of Leo DiCaprio. I love that scene with him in the trailer.
Oh yeah,
with his motivational and talking to and
beating himself up.
Yeah, and I believe that thing was like 95% improv. I think I saw him talking.
There's a lot of that dialogue in the book, though.
Is it?
Yeah, you need to see that, and there's some things that are fleshed out there too that are very interesting. And Quentin Tarantino wrote it himself.
Okay.
After he made the movie. So it wasn't So
he was able to type a few.
Yeah, you've seen the movie, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Love that movie. Love the vibe of it. Love Quentin Tarantino. Period. But I'm especially attracted to anything involving old Hollywood, and I must recommend very quickly the Paramount Plus series that just wrapped up shortly, about a week ago, called The Offer. Have you heard about that?
Yes. Yeah.
Incredibly well done. I'm a huge Godfather fan, and they nailed that project. And what's crazy about it, there's so many dramatic twists and turns that you're watching. So, well, they had to make that up, or they had to alter the timeline to make this fit. And I went and researched it, and I'd be doggone. I mean, there are real gangland murders that resulted because Godfather was being made. And Al Ruddy, who was the producer, who's the focus of the movie, was right in the middle of all of it. He's very lucky that neither him or any of his people were taken out by some of the mafia that did not want that movie to get made.
Wow.
It's a fantastic film, or a fantastic series, 10 parts.
Well, here's your 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon for that. So I was actually in a film with Miles Teller.
Really?
I was in the Spectacular Now, which was his breakthrough film.
I'll have to go look that up.
I'm in a deleted scene.
Oh,
entire scene, but it's on the DVD, or if you do the digital download with the special features. I'm the convenience store clerk, but it's just me and Miles and this kid. The kid was great. His whole storyline got cut from the movie, and he had lines, so I felt bad for the kid, but Miles was great.
His performance in Maverick was awesome as well.
Yeah.
And by the way, have you seen Maverick?
No, I've not seen that yet. I've heard a lot of people talk about it.
Did you see the original Top Gun?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long has it been since you saw it?
Probably about 20 years.
Okay, you need to rewatch it, because I saw it years ago. We watched it with my son before we went to go see Maverick, and I soaked it all back in. But there are a couple of very fun,
like Easter eggs.
Yeah, Easter eggs, especially involving the Jennifer Connelly character. Okay. So pay attention. Watch the first movie.
And then go see
Take note, and then watch the second one, and you'll say, "Oh, I know who she is."
Awesome.
But I really love that movie.
That's awesome. Stuff. Awesome. Well, Austin, that's it. That's our Fast Five, and that's the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Man. It was a pleasure, and I appreciate you doing this. And please, I said this a little bit, but I want to reemphasize it. If it were not for your father-in-law, WGAC as we know it, I don't think would exist today. My career would never have been what it was, or what it is. And I owe him. I'll always owe him. I think that probably 5% every year should be kicked back to him, but I'm not going to do it.
I will cut that out and send that to him, because he'll appreciate that.
But he really, and for those of you who don't know, the happy ending to the story is Barry Young, on the air at KFYI in Phoenix, Arizona, became one of the leading talk radio hosts of the southwestern United States, and he discovered a lady talking about computers, lecturing about computers, and he thought that she would be a good interview on the radio. And the next thing you know, he has talked her into doing a regular computer show over 25 years ago, and her name is Kim Commando. So Rob's father-in-law is Mr. Commando.
Yep.
And by the way, was he 20 years older than her?
I don't know. I don't know.
She is gorgeous. She was really gorgeous back when they met. I think she was like 17 or something. No, she's older than that. But just a wonderful, wonderful power couple in the talk radio industry, and very proud of what Barry has done. And I love bragging to people that I knew him back in the day.
Have you gone out to see West Star, the studios?
No,
and everything?
I have not.
Next time, if you're ever in Phoenix, you need to call them up and check out, because they were in a small where they just did the audio stuff because they do the podcast and the radio shows and all that stuff. But now there's a whole television side to it too. You got to see it. It's amazing.
I've heard Kim talking about it, and it's funny. We were out there about 10 years ago to watch the Steelers play the Cardinals. And if I had not been caught up in who the head coach of the Cardinals was and visiting with him, his name was Ken Wisenhunt from Augusta, Georgia, I would have, and he had been the offensive coordinator for the Steelers the year before, I probably would have remembered to go look him up. But what an incredible radio legacy he has. And I thank him every day.
Yeah. Well, Austin, if people want to keep up with you, obviously you've got the show, but do you do a lot of social media or anything like that?
Goodness
can
gracious.
Find you online.
I have one of the most active media-related social media pages in Augusta, the Austin Rhodes Show page on Facebook. I've got 54,000 active followers, and probably at least that many that refuse to put their name down as followers that are constantly griping at me. And it's fun. It's a blast. It's most of the time it is. Sometimes it gets a little hairy, but Austin Rhodes Show page on Facebook, and of course I'm on 3 to 6 every afternoon, Monday through Friday on WGAC Augusta.
Awesome. I'll make sure to put those links in the show notes, and of course you can find more information on the guest page at chewingthefatbr.com. One more time, Austin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And if you would like to support this podcast, I'd appreciate it if you buy me a coffee at chewingthefatbr.com. But until next time, I look forward to we have a moment to sit a spell and chew the fat.